Okay, hey everyone, welcome to The Field Between. I'm Ahmed.
I'm Yasmin.
Okay, in this episode, what are we doing? We're just gonna do some general updates and then I think read some poetry of the moment.
Yeah, we haven't done poetry for a while, so Ahmed had this idea, which I really loved, of thinking about. We're trying to actually organize an event here in Pittsburgh, so this is us partially brainstorming for that. But of just resistance poetry and poetry of hope, thinking about Palestine, but thinking more largely about injustice in the world.
Yeah, and I think it's especially kind of, it sounds cheesy, but like in when things are bad, I think I have a tendency also to kind of slip a little bit into a nihilistic feeling or being very pessimistic. And I generally am very pessimistic, but I think it also comes from a place of optimism and seeing like how many things are just awful right now and how much suffering and, death and like just needless destruction is happening. Knowing that we have the ability to make things better, or not, is just very dismaying. But I think it's important to kind of try to find your way back to seeing beauty.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of keeps you energized to be able to participate in larger resistance movements and being active and not just sitting on your couch and doing nothing.
Yeah. And I think I've seen something really lovely kind of circulating on social media, which is like that we don't, even if it's hard and it's okay to acknowledge that it's hard, like there are so many people who are refusing to give up, and we need to honor that by not assuming that it's a fait accompli, and not assuming that there won't be a more positive outcome out of this. Yeah. Like honoring their resistance by believing in it.
Yeah. So I think we have some updates as they relate to Gaza and Palestine.
And then also as it really relates to growing Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we will get to those. Do you want to start with some other updates? I know we wanted to talk about the Hasan Minhaj thing just real quick because we did an episode about it.
Yes. Okay. So Hasan Minhaj released a very Hasan Minhaj 20-minute with graphics, infographics, and music and all of it response to the New Yorker piece.
Yep. Which we discussed. And I just want to say I was right. I got to get some music or some cheers. Maybe I'll throw that in here.
The advantages of being the editor.
But, I think actually, to be fair, when we discussed it, we took it as true what was in the article. And, well, I didn't. I think I said, like, of course he's going to embellish because he's a comedian. There's no way that many things in his life happened with perfect setup punchline. And every comedian does this, right? Like, every comedian lies, I put this in quotation mark, on stage because you go to be emotionally manipulated. That's why you're there. And it never really bothered me all that much. And I wasn't like, yeah, this was never a thing where I was thinking I'm never going to listen to Hasan Minhaj again, or I feel like my trust as a viewer of his is going to be betrayed. And it turns out this reporter just, for whatever reason, singled him out and like spliced quotes together.
I will add some nuance to that. So he went through 3 stories. He went through the prom story, and that one the reporter completely fucked up. Like it was crazy. And I will say, if you really
that's the one where she spliced.
Yeah, like she literally just took things out of context. Like there was emails and all this evidence to kind of show that like Hasan Minhaj had always protected the identity of this woman that he dated. That she was completely okay with the way that he told the story. That it was about his race. It's just the timing that he changed for comedy, which I think is totally fine. Mm-hmm. And I will say, in my defense, on our episode about Hasan Minhaj, I said the prom story did not bother me. Yeah. I was like, I absolutely believe that race was part of that story. Like,
you were bothered more by the FBI
The FBI story bothered me. And I will say, I feel softer, but it still does bother me a little bit that I just think it was dumb that he chose the name of someone that had been in the news instead of just like using a different name. Like I just thought it added too much to the story and that it was too much of a falsehood personally. But I have softened. I do feel sad that he like didn't get the Daily Show because of this.
An article just totally premised on the FBI thing though.
No, but it was a total hit piece. You're totally right.
Yeah. It's like why him, and people have made the point, why single out this like one brown male comedian?
Probably because of that, honestly. I mean, really it worked. Sense. Like he didn't get the Daily Show. He was first in line, which is kind of sad.
Do we know that he was first in line?
That's what the buzz has been. We don't know that for sure. But they completely withdrew him from consideration. Sure. So, yeah.
Could have been for other reasons, but this...
Well, the withdrawing from consideration certainly, it seems, was obvious because of this, because of the timing. But whether or not he was the only first one, I don't know for sure.
I think the most important thing to keep in mind here is that I was right.
That's not true.
It's true. I was absolutely.
And then the third story that he went
vindicated.
through to verify was the anthrax story. And that one I also was on his side. Like, it was more of a timing thing. I didn't think it was too much hyperbole. But I'm not going to lie. The FBI story still bothers me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still not bothered by it. But
no, that's fair. But I felt a lot softer. And I was also like, how weird of this New Yorker, like, journalist to just, like, completely take things out of context. It was so strange.
Yeah, it is really a case of journalistic malpractice.
Yeah, it felt like a targeted piece.
For sure.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm glad we got that important updated.
Yeah, was there anything else related to Hasan Minhaj? I thought we had.
No, I think that was it.
No, he's going to be doing some shows in like Cleveland, I think, this week, which is pretty close to us. So if you wanted to go apologize to him in person.
It's okay. We're going to DC this weekend, so I think our travel docket is full.
That's true. That is more important.
And we had friends in town this past weekend, which was really fun. And then my sister here this past weekend. But all I have to say, it's been quite busy around here.
Yeah. Okay, so the other update that we talked about it last episode?
Yeah, it was last episode.
The museum exhibit here that got canceled because of a scheduling conflict.
Yeah, so allegedly the Frick Art Museum in Pittsburgh was supposed to have an Islamic art exhibit. When it was canceled, we were curious as to why.
Right. So we called and
Ahmed specifically investigated, which I appreciated.
No. We both called.
Called initially the Frick, and they were kind of like, scheduling. And we were like, so is there
conflict?
Yeah, we were like, is there a new exhibit coming in? And they were like, no. And we were like, huh.
Okay, so where's the scheduling conflict?
Yeah, and the only explanation could then be like where the collection was coming from.
Right.
So then Ahmed called the Huntington, which I guess is, I don't really know exactly what it is, but they like were holding the collection that was supposed to come here.
I called the Huntington, the art museum and library that owns the gallery and the artifacts. But another group is in charge of touring it. It's called International Art and Artists.
You went like a step further.
Yeah. So they're the ones in charge of like moving the piece around from exhibit to exhibit. It's, I guess, scheduling all that stuff. I'm not exactly sure how the art world works in that case. But anyway, I called them and asked to confirm whether or not the scheduling conflict was on their side. Maybe they decided to show it somewhere else or something like that. And so I called, and the woman who picked up was like, I told her, I was just like, hey, I was looking forward to seeing this exhibit. Do you know like what the nature of the scheduling conflict was, or where I might be able to see it, or when it's coming to Pittsburgh? And she's like, well, right now, we couldn't show it at the Frick, but it's going to be in like Texas A&M Museum or something in March. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, where is it now? Like, and she said that it's just sitting in storage.
It's nowhere.
And I was like,
and you said that you got the sense that she sort of got what you were getting at, but
yeah.
wasn't going to say it explicitly.
And I was like, oh, okay, because I was told it was a scheduling conflict. So I was trying to understand, was the conflict on your side? But if it's, sitting in storage, it doesn't sound like that's the case.
Right.
She's like, yep. ...
Kind
of very sheepishly.
So then a local paper, was it the Gazette?
No, it was some paper, some Tribune or something.
Let me check. The Pittsburgh Tribune. We should credit it. Let me look real fast. It is the Pittsburgh Tribune, which is, we're new here. It's not a paper I'm familiar with, but a local paper broke the story today.
Lots of pop-ups on their website.
Yeah, it was a short story, so definitely room for people to comment more. But they basically said that they pulled it because they were afraid that it would be insensitive to Pittsburgh's Jewish community, which I have a lot to say about that. And this is, I'm not going to name names because it's not my place to, but this is in conversation and shaped by people I've talked to.
Yeah.
Incredibly offensive for several reasons.
Yeah.
One, very Islamophobic to assume that art just vaguely generally related with Islam and Muslims would be offensive. Like, ridiculous to say that what is probably like art from the 10th century has anything to do with the current conflict in Palestine. Insane.
Yeah.
Two, so Islamophobic. Two, honestly, very anti-Semitic and weird to just assume that Jewish Americans would randomly be upset about Islamic art exhibit.
Well, did they try to also link it to because it was the anniversary of the Tree of Life?
Yeah, and in fact,
shooting.
actually, again, we're new here, but from conversations I've had with Jews in Pittsburgh, like the Tree of Life shooting which was a really awful shooting by a white supremacist several years ago in a synagogue here in Pittsburgh, called the Tree of Life, was actually an occasion where like Muslims and Jews really came together. Yeah. Like, not because the shooter was Muslim, he wasn't, but because the synagogue was targeted in part, according to the ramblings of this, you know, psychotic person who did the shooting, because they did a lot of refugee aid from like a lot of Muslim majority countries. Yeah. And then, you know, knowing that the Muslim, I mean, of course, a lot of people would have rallied to the synagogue anyway, but especially because of that, a lot of the Muslim community here showed out in solidarity and like were super upset and like, you know, stood together with their neighbors. So the city actually has like a really unique interfaith history between those two communities. Not even history, it's like recent. So it just, it seems like a ridiculous thing to say. It's honestly, I think, really offensive to kind of assume that Jews would think that way, that anyone would think that way.
Effort to kind of try to offend no one, they ended up
offending everyone. Yeah.
It's a very cowardly move.
Yeah. I mean, I knew a lot of Jewish professors who were planning on taking their classes there. Like, it's just a strange thing. Yeah.
So hopefully you can push from your position as a...
Yeah, I think we are...
Sort of acknowledgement, or, you know...
I mean, honestly, what I would like, if the museum is willing to be self-reflexive, because I personally just think that calling out is helpful, but like, we're educators, like I'm an educator. I think that having some kind of panel might be helpful to like talk at the museum, like publicly, about like the way this is handled and like what could have been done differently, like something public facing. I'm not sure if they'd be willing to open themselves up to that kind of publicity, but that's what I think the right move would be, like morally and from an educational standpoint.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, ridiculous. And I feel like you and I both had this impulse that we were like, or I guess what's the right word? Not impulse, like instinct.
Intuition.
Like the minute we kind of heard that, we were like, this is definitely because of current events, even though that like on paper seems crazy.
Yeah, it's real stupid.
Yeah. And we're like laughing, or I'm laughing because it is funny and outlandish, but it is honestly like kind of scary and worrisome that people are kind of drawing dots in this way.
Yeah, especially from your position as a scholar of race and religion, and kind of having a deep understanding that these things, you know, are separate things, but they kind of reinforce and inform one another. But seeing how people get confused between the two and operating with that,
the kind of broad sweeps
must
that people
be frustrating,
right? And it's also a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if you draw these broad sweeps and you act like, you know, an Islamic art piece could be dangerous, then it kind of like, then you reinforce that reality for people. Like, that's what people will think. It's also just ironic, and this is too much of a tangent for us to get into, but there've been so many debates over censorship in terms of like different types of art having to do with Islam and like imagery of the prophet, and it is kind of ironic to me a little bit, like who gets to censor and who gets to be angry, and like who gets to kind of like call the lines about what is offensive and what is not, and what is innocuous and what isn't. There's an art historian I've been chatting with at my university. I'm really interested to hear her take.
Speaking of censorship, it's happening everywhere. I don't know if you've followed some of like the ongoing discourse or, you know, happenings on like various campuses, but there is just like a huge concerted effort to censor, in universities, student groups that are advocating for Palestinian rights.
Especially students for justice for Palestine, SJPs. Yeah.
And it's just like we talked before, right? Like, there is this, attempt to equate those who are advocating for Palestinians with Hamas, and an attempt to equate Hamas with ISIS, and the rhetoric of, this is our 9/11, these are the terrorists, and just kind of having this very black and white, unnuanced language around the issue, is making it so that it's easier for a lot of the, Alan Dershowitzes of the world, a lot of the people, in like the AIPAC lobby, and the JDL, and like a lot of...
You mean the ADL? Huh? You mean the ADL? The American Defense League?
Yes, ADL, thank you.
Yeah. I will quickly insert, the ADL does some decent work, but they also are very pro-Israel. Yeah.
Just an all-out attempt to silence and censor student groups who are advocating for Palestinians.
Absolutely.
So there have been a lot, like Ron DeSantis, I think, has come out
Oh my God!
wanting
of course
to
he has.
for the Florida university system or whatever.
What's left of
it?
it?
Yeah, wanting to. I don't really know exactly what he means by this. I don't know if you heard, but he's just like wanting to discredit this or any student groups on campus that do that. So he's like kind of wanting to give a directive to the universities to say you need to get rid of these groups on your campus.
I wonder what that look like not using the university's name, or maybe no university funding, or like literally trying. It's very McCarthyism kind of.
Groups don't really get university funding.
No,
you know what I'm saying?
Not much. Yeah.
So,
well, it depends. Sometimes they get some, but not much. Yeah.
In my mind, I feel like what they're trying to work up to is being able to say,
this is hate speech.
If you do this speech, yeah, exactly. If you do this speech, you will be kicked off of the campus.
So then in Florida, you like will be able to say that like
slavery didn't happen.
Right, that slavery didn't happen, but you won't be able to be pro-Palestine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
So there was that with Ron DeSantis. And there have been a couple of videos of people like actually taking, videos of on-campus protests and demonstrations, totally peaceful marches, and trying to present a warped image of them so that they look violent.
Mm-hmm. The ones that we've been to, the only violence has been from agitators.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even then, thankfully, it wasn't violent, but there was like a couple scary little, or one really.
Yeah, there were a couple of viral videos. One from a student at Cooper Union, or from students at Cooper Union.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
Yeah, so there was a march that was going through campus, and I guess they went through the library or whatever, but these students, presumably Jewish students, took a video from a room in the library and said that they were trapped in that room and had been chased there by like a violent pro-Palestinian
But that was like not the
mob.
case. It was just like a march.
And they were the video was saying that like we fear for our lives here, like we're not safe or whatever. And if you're watching the video, because you hear the protests go by, like they're trying to make it seem like these people were like beating down the door to get these Jewish students. And of course later it was investigated and the police were like, yeah, there was nothing for us to investigate.
I've also seen a lot of it, I'm sure you have too, just kind of Jewish anti-Zionist activists speaking out against like how lonely they've been made to feel, and also like how in some cases it's also being doxxed, but really just like the loneliness of being made to feel that they're somehow not being authentically Jewish by being either anti-Israel or in some cases even having a more nuanced stance that's not like blatantly pro-Israel, which I honestly think is starting to become like, I don't want to like be too optimistic and say the majority, but like really a lot of young Jewish Americans. And so it's kind of crazy that there is that sort of pushback, but yeah.
That's the great irony in this, is that it's done under the guise of saying like, oh, well, after the Holocaust, like we give our uncritical support to like making sure that Jews are protected and that this never happens again. The persecution of Jews never happens. But there have been so many Jews who have been very supportive of Palestinians
who have been persecuted.
And there are just like videos you can see today of like them getting arrested by like several hundred peaceful Jewish protesters getting beaten and arrested by police officers.
There was an amazing protest over the weekend, for what I could see online in New York City, in Grand Central Station, just like thousands of mostly young Jewish anti-Zionists. I think other
JBP,
anti-Zionists from different backgrounds too, not just Jews. But it was really powerful and beautiful to look at. Happening at the same time as the internet and Gaza went out. So it was like a particularly scary weekend, just kind of wondering what was happening. The
other thing was, I'll throw this video in here, but there was a student, I can't remember at what university, but she like went to the administrator at the university and was just like went viral and was asking them to like do something about the pro-Palestine. She's just like, I can't believe you're letting this happen, blah blah blah, and like we're not safe.
Alone! They want our people dead! They want us killed!
And so part of it.
How is it allowed? How are you allowing this? Why are you putting us so close? They want us dead!
So again, like just the continuation of rhetoric saying that because there are students who are advocating for a ceasefire,
Right.
That makes us unsafe because they are essentially
I've heard about
terrorists.
some of this rhetoric even from my own students. Just saying that they're stressed, including some of my students who are Jewish.
Yeah.
Obviously won't go into any identifying details, but like who have said that they're stressed out by pressure from their peers because they have anti-Zionist stances.
Yeah.
I don't talk about this in my classes. It's just something like one or two students have talked about to me outside of class, one-on-one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it must be a scary time to be a student activist, because it is like very real. You know, new grads have been put on blacklists so that they don't get hired. People have had job offers rescinded.
Yeah.
For giving.
I do think that the backlash is because the tide, it's not worth the human cost of the genocide that's happening in Palestine. So I don't mean to in any way diminish that. But in terms of the American picture, I do think it's because the tide is slightly turning against like at least just kind of metaphorical blank checks to Israel. And I think that that's why there's so much pushback. And I do think a lot of groundwork has already been laid by activists. Like I don't think that I'd be able to record this with you, you know, even as like small and like homegrown as a project as this is between just you and I don't think I'd be able to speak so comfortably about my opinions. Like, I don't think I could have done this like 5 years ago, even.
I don't know. It's hard to say because we may be seeing a swing back in the other direction because it seems like the fundamental attack is on free speech.
It is, but there just wasn't room for this. Like, at least from what I've heard from like other religious studies scholars, like there wasn't room for this kind of nuance 10 years ago in any format without you worrying about losing your job. Even though like on paper, as someone who is an academic, I should have a right to have like a life outside of my job and like what I say in the classroom, you know, as long as I'm not like proselytizing a certain opinion in the classroom, because I'm not a historian of the Middle East, it's not relevant to what I'm currently teaching, in my opinion. You know, as long I should have the right to kind of just talk off the record. But I don't know. I'm also lucky, honestly, to be at an institution and really more in a department where I feel comfortable doing that. But
I mean, yeah, that's fair. But maybe someone would have said that post 9/11 when there were a few dissenting voices and even votes in Congress, just kind of like we're seeing today. But they were, you know, they could have been like, oh, we finally got to a point where there's but then the process of silencing all these people happened.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're seeing that again, is that there's a battle on campuses, there's a battle in the news media to make sure that you demonize anyone who has a dissenting opinion. And in fact, like, it's not even dissenting, it's just like 66% of people are for a ceasefire.
Right.
For whatever reason, the elected officials will not, abide by that or honor that.
But I mean, I've even heard like this poet that I really love and admire, Hanifa Bukarab, kind of pointed out that having lived through like the protests of the Iraq War, that he feels like the media is now giving more coverage to anti-war protests. I'm not saying that it's enough, but I do think there is a slight shift. I think part of it might also just be honestly because there's like more, I don't know. Or maybe it's just because like the carnage that's happening is so blatant that it's hard not to like give a little bit more of the other side just because there's so many people who are dying. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is that they're trying to make sure that that's not the case. Because you even saw like the Secretary of State went to Qatar and was just like, tell Al Jazeera to not cover this so heavily. Fucking insane. Yeah.
Yeah. And meanwhile, in the US, you know, news media seems to be dragging its feet to really represent the truth accurately. You even see our own fucking president just go on and be like, I don't believe the death toll counts.
That was unforgivable.
How many people have to die?
Yeah.
You know?
No, that was literally unforgivable. I can't believe he said that. I think that he lost a lot of, obviously he lost a lot of votes.
And rightly so. Like,
absolutely.
No one should vote for him.
No one should lie about death and
like sympathy for the Palestinians. I totally would make the argument that you should not vote for Joe Biden.
I'm really on the fence, honestly. I mean, I think the Democrats have to do better than like, we're going to Muslim ban you if you don't vote for us. And I think that it might take, I'm just worried selfishly about the repercussions of another Trump presidency, like on a domestic level, because I don't think that the international will get better or worse. But I do think that it might take there are a lot of both Muslim and Arab, and those are different categories, but they sometimes overlap voters in 3 swing states in Pennsylvania. What is it? Pennsylvania, Michigan and Georgia, is it?
Is it Georgia? I don't know.
Definitely
Texas,
definitely
but
Pennsylvania. Well, Texas goes red anyway though, but
yeah.
definitely definitely Michigan and Pennsylvania where we currently are. And I think it might Minnesota's pretty reliably blue, not as much of a swing state. I think it's Georgia. I could be wrong.
Georgia? Okay.
But definitely Michigan and Pennsylvania are swing states with a lot of both Muslims and Arabs. And, you know, Arab is an ethnic category. There are many Christian Arabs, and Muslim includes many different groups, including African Americans, including South Asian Americans. But it might take losing the election for them to take that voice seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And so that might just be the cost it has to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't. I think they've kind of. I mean, it's a genocide, right? Like,
no, absolutely.
It's how many people have to die?
It's the most children that have been killed in an armed or there's some statistic that like since 2019, this is the most children that has. You added up all the children that have been killed in armed conflicts around the world since 2019. Like that's how many children have been killed in Gaza. It's like 3,000 kids. It's insane. Like the numbers are crazy. Yeah. There are no attempts to protect civilians. There's no like even whisper of pretending to care about international law. The fact that we're giving military aid to a country that just cut the internet and jeopardized like, you know, UN officials that were in Gaza, like they don't. It's not only that they not care about Palestinians. They're just completely flouting international law, and we literally pay for it. It's crazy. Doing it,
and then they're telling us that it's not happening. Again, like Joe Biden getting up and being like, "I don't believe that this happened." Blinken saying you need to stop covering this as much.
I mean, the Times finally said. I mean, this is different than obviously the government, but the Times finally said, like, it does not look like. You know, whatever you think of Hamas, it does not look like they bombed Gazans. Like they did not bomb their own hospital. Like it was not from them. Like that was Israeli propaganda. Yeah, shocking. And even like the State Department had to say, I believe, like, it looks like Israel did cut the cell service. Like, you know, like that wasn't obviously, but like, I mean, it's crazy that's.
Meanwhile, on Fox News, I shared this with you, but there was a segment. It's just fucking.
I think you might have also shared it in the podcast last time.
I don't think I did.
Really? Okay.
No. If I did, oops. But I don't think I did. But it just makes my blood boil that they just had a segment about dogs that were being reunited from their owner after the October 7th attack.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And even then, I'm just like. I'm sure they're lying, right? Like this is like they're not actually doing these. They're just dogs that they have.
Like they are literally who gives a shit.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah, seriously. Like we both like animals, but like just the fact that they like won't care about actual human lives.
They actually talk about Palestinians as being dogs and animals, and they're talking about Hamas as being dogs.
But you know, this is like an old story. Honestly, this is it's awful, but it's a similar thing in the United States where like. Coverage about like animals and dogs will get more coverage than like killings of like minorities, especially if they are black in the United States. I mean, that's like, it's awful, but it's like a thing that you see like, it's
disgusting. It really makes my blood boil. Do you want to hear some of the email? So I emailed our one of our senators, John Fetterman, who's allegedly supposed to be like a pretty progressive guy, but surprise, he's not when it comes to Israel, Palestine. And actually he's kind of shown himself to be just like down the middle centrist Democrat, very disappointing in like many respects, but
I don't know enough about Fetterman to comment on that, but
so he says, thanks for reaching out to my office. By the way, I emailed him and being like, you need to get your ass in line and support a ceasefire and not support giving a bunch of aid to Israel for it to brutalize Palestinians. Not exactly in those words, but you know.
Right.
He says, I appreciate hearing this, and I know this is a form. I know he didn't sit there and type this with his own fingers, but this is the statement his office is putting out. I forcefully condemn Hamas's unjustified terrorist attacks on Israel. I grieve the loss of thousands of innocent civilians, including Israelis, Palestinians, and Americans, and I am sickened by the reports of those being held hostage. We must do everything in our power to bring them home safely and quickly. In the Senate, I will unequivocally support any necessary security, intelligence, and humanitarian assistance to Israel in its time of need. The United States has a moral obligation to stand with our ally as it confronts this terrorist threat.
My understanding of the hostage crisis is that it's supposed to be like leverage, like that if Israel like released the thousands of Palestinian political prisoners, then the hostages would be released. And I feel like that part is getting left out of reporting a little bit.
Not even that anymore. Like, I think Hamas said that they will release them if they have a 5-day ceasefire and like give fuel, not even to Hamas, like directly to the infrastructure that needs it. So like hospitals and things like that. So Israel has refused to do that.
And they're kind of just allowing their own citizens to get bombed, which is crazy. Yeah.
Israel?
I mean, they're not like doing anything to protect the hostages in Gaza. They're just continuing to, you know.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
And of the hostages that have been freed, again, it cuts against the narrative that these are savage barbarians, right? Like, there have been some hostages freed for medical reasons, and we hear video from them who have said, all things considered, they were treated fairly okay.
Though we want to obviously add as a caveat, or at least I want to add as a caveat
sure it's a
to that it's
overall.
We're not like saying like, oh yay, being kidnapped.
No,
we're not saying complete sign off on Hamas's tactics at all.
I'm not endorsing it.
No, I'm just adding because I want to have it on record.
I'm saying
but
it cuts against the narrative that is
it
being
absolutely
fueled
does.
as them beheading babies and like burning. Like,
I'm laughing because I'm picturing like this being spliced up and like put before me during a tenure review. But continue.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. Plus, it is important to clarify, obviously, like what our exact stance is. But anyway, continue.
Like I'd have to look this up, but someone had been quoted from the IDF or something as saying like, "Oh, we found a baby in an oven," like after the Hamas attacks, and I was just like, dude, like, what a stupid
we've already
fucking
talked
story.
about that. It's so silly, the whole baby thing. Like, it's awful
But
enough.
they're still pushing that narrative.
I know.
Even though everyone knows.
And again,
that
it's just strange because like 1,300 Israelis were killed. I'm like, that's horrific enough. You don't have to make up shit about babies. It's so odd.
And if you want to talk about babies being killed,
so many children have died in Palestine.
Like,
it's
babies
insane.
are being killed.
Yeah.
In Palestine. I had a point before. What was I talking about? Just to kind of cut against that narrative. Yeah. So they were saying that, like, all things considered, they were treated fairly humanely.
Yeah.
Some even saying that, like, during the attacks, they saw like IDF, like in the confusion, like IDF was also shooting into the crowds indiscriminately and killing Israelis and like
accidentally
all this stuff. And it's just like, it's a fucking mess. And it's really hard as like it's hard to see just the manufactured media around this and on campuses and everywhere.
And look, I'm a New York Times girl. I was born and raised and grew up I wasn't born at the New York Times, but I grew up reading the Times. And I still skim the Times. I mostly get my news listening to NPR. But I would say that the Times, I respect a lot of their reporting. They have excellent world-class journalists. It is the same paper that did not push back enough against the completely made up false allegations of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that kind of, we are a nation that is constantly at war. You have no idea how normalized it is. It's insane. We are a very, very war hungry, very violent, obviously there are wonderful things about this country, mostly from acts of resistance, honestly. But I think that we just really naturalize war. And so I think it is important, if you can, to diversify your mediascape a little bit. Al Jazeera, AJ Plus, which is like a outlet of Al Jazeera. I keep on saying Haaretz, they're not perfect, but honestly, it is crazy how much more nuanced that paper is than the Times. I know I
saw a pretty fucked up op-ed.
There are some that are fucked up for sure, but also there are a lot of op-eds that would never see the light of day here. Seriously. Never, ever, ever.
I would say here for U.S. media, Intercept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like mainstream publications.
Democracy Now.
Yeah, those are two that I personally think are helpful just to kind of get an idea of different perspectives. But I recommend. I ran out of Haaretz articles, but yeah.
Yeah. So, was there any other?
No, it was a good roundup.
All
All right.
So I think it's probably a good
Jinx.
time to
Get some poetry in.
Yeah. So again, I think it's.
I think we got
I feel
it.
angry a lot, but I think it's it's
Yeah.
a good time to just kind of try to find something where you find inspiration.
Absolutely.
Especially you and I are gonna go to DC on Saturday.
Yeah, we got to book our tickets and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, because there's a big march. If you're just hearing about this for the first time,
What
maybe
day?
we'll
What
see
day
you
will
there.
the Saturday be? November 4th. Yeah,
November
and we're gonna
4th.
pick a place to get dinner that night. So if anyone that we know is in town, they can come meet us there if they are free, obviously.
Yeah. So
'Cause it's just-
our
it's
two
too hard.
listeners.
It's too hard to coordinate during protests. So yeah,
Yeah.
and it's important to have community around these things.
Yeah, for sure. Also, if you're in Pittsburgh, we're gonna try to do this like an event similar to this.
Yeah,
in
which
person.
would be, let's think, not this Friday, but next Friday. What day is that?
Let
me look at a calendar.
The 10th.
That's right. Yeah, November 10th, inshallah. 6 p.m. Date to be determined.
Yeah.
With the Caravanserai chai pop-ups, Ahmed does a real new wrinkle being in such a cold, rainy city is thinking about space and how we host them.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of, adapting to new circumstances, figuring that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get sponsored by Canada Goose.
Yeah, that would
And
be
everyone
helpful.
there will just have like a real street fashionable puffy jacket.
That'd be really helpful.
And then we can just stay outside as long as we need to.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to start or should I start?
I'll start because I've got quite a few, so we can maybe go back and forth.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we each like picked from different poets and different books and
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
we don't know each other's
No.
poems. And then I think in post, I'll maybe try to add some music to complement.
That
the
was a cool
reading.
idea. I like that. Yeah. All right. So this first poem was one of my favorites. I post it every July 4th. It's by Safia.
Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's by Safia El Helio. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. She's a Sudanese American poet that I absolutely love. Really prolific. I could go on a rant about how I've kind of followed her since high school, but I'll save that for another time.
Yeah. Make sure as you read, you're using big voice.
Okay.
And then also directing your voice to
Yes,
the mic.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, it's called Self-Portrait with No Flag. I pledge allegiance to my homies, to my mother's small and cool palms, to the gap between my brother's two front teeth, and to my grandmother's good brown hands. Good strong brown hands gathering my bare feet in her lap. I pledge allegiance to the group text. I pledge allegiance to laughter and to all the boys I have a crush on. I pledge allegiance to my spearmint plant, to my split ends, to my grandfather's brain and gray left eye. I come from two failed countries, and I give them back. I pledge allegiance to no land, no border cut by force to draw blood. I pledge allegiance to no government, no collection of white men carving up the map with their pens. I choose the table at the Waffle House, with all of my loved ones crowded into the booth. I choose the shining dark of our faces through a thin sheet of smoke, glowing dark of our faces, slick under layers of sweat. I choose the world we make with our living, refusing to be unmade by what surrounds us. I choose us gathered at the lakeside, the light glinting off the water and our laughing teeth, and along the living dark of our hair, and this is my only country. I really love that one. I like a lot that I come from two failed countries, just thinking about, like recent immigration, and like I have a lot of family lore in my dad's family, or not even lore, but like a lot of my dad's family have been involved in diplomacy on behalf of Pakistan, and I just think like Pakistan, as it turned out, is an abomination of a state that like treats its minorities terribly.
Yeah.
And I, again, like the parts of being American that make me feel really, really the most proud are kind of like, it sounds cheesy, but it's true, like acts of resistance and like leaders who have really kind of spoken truth to power, like the Rabbi Herschels, the Malcolm X's, the Martin Luther Kings, like lots of other leaders. And I just also love this idea of like, honestly, nation states are not all of that. And like the thing that really kind of gives life meaning is kind of the people that you invest in, the community that you invest in.
Yeah.
And just that is a thing that should kind of get you through the day.
Or that you can even redefine like nationalism not to mean like the borders of this country.
Yeah. Like the poetry of a place, the love you have
Yeah.
for like its people and its culture. It doesn't have to be tied to its government.
Yeah, and nationalism in the true sense that you honor the people who are beside you in your community and that you want the best for them, and that's what's important.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, should I go?
Yeah.
So I just want to say, when we decided to do this, I picked out this book that my junior year AP English teacher gave me as a gift when I graduated from high school.
So sweet.
So thank you, Miss Steed. I'm sure she's not listening, but I found it seemed very like serendipitous that I just like came upon this poem, and then I'll tell you a funny story. But it's titled Intifada by Samuel Hazo, who is a poet and novelist and essayist and playwright from Pittsburgh.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
We should look him up.
Let me read a short bio for you here before I read the poem. Poet, novelist, essayist, and playwright Sam Hazo founded and continues to direct International Poetry Forum in Pittsburgh, where he is also the McNulty Distinguished Professor of English Emeritus at Duquesne University. He writes poetry of immense intelligence, lyricism, and humanity, with perfect pitch and ever-varied grammatical attack. Among his numerous poetry collections are the Holy... Blah, 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 blah. We'll skip this part. Anyway, so he was the poet laureate for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for
Hey, we
10
should
years.
email him. That would be kind of cute.
He is 95 years old.
Oh my
so
gosh, he might not still be.
You don't have much time left.
Also, when did this book come out? He might not be with us.
No, he's
still.
95 years old.
Oh,
today.
now. Did you look him up? Is he still
I
alive?
did. Yeah, he's alive.
Oh,
So you can get in touch with him.
very sweet.
But this name struck me as very familiar because I was just like, Sam Hazo, where have I heard that name before? Sam Hazo. And it turns out, so he has a son who's a composer, and in high school and like whatever, like we played a lot of his pieces.
Oh, how random.
So I was familiar with him, with his son at least, through playing his music and compositions.
Very serendipitous.
So I was connected to him from North Carolina through his son, and now here from being in Pittsburgh and through this poem. All right, anyway, so this poem is called Intifada. Singly at first, then doubly, then slowly by the 10s or 20s, then steadily on. Interviewed about the death count in Ramallah, one sergeant said, "We'll kill them all, but we'll never forgive them for making us do it." Later he aimed his Uzi at a boy, armed with a stone and the slingshot. One general claimed his soldiers fired only rubber-coated bullets. When asked about the difference to the dead, he frowned and shouted, "Their leaders and parents used those children as human shields. Despite the contradicting photographs, pundits and lobbyists concurred. After all, who could deny that boys with all their lives ahead of them would happily seek execution, that mothers loved to see their sons in open coffins, that choosing a brave death instead of a lifelong one was an option for fools. No one would claim that occupation to the occupied resembled daily suffocation. No one would add that suffocation or the fear of it begot a courage born of desperation. No one compared it to the fate of being locked in darkness in a stalled elevator underground. Like someone buried upright and alive, anyone trapped there would stop at nothing."
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I think that's like a, rather good poem, and like really captures, I think, hopefully the gravity of having lived in occupation, and just I think it does a good job of humanizing. I don't know when he wrote this.
After the first or second Intifada.
Yeah. All right, your turn.
All right, I've got a poem by Mahmoud Darwish. I'll read a little bit about his bio from the Poetry Foundation. Palestinian Mahmoud Darwish was born in Al-Burwa in Galilee a village that was occupied and later razed by the Israeli army. Because they had missed the official Israeli census, Darwish and his family were considered internal refugees or present-absent aliens. Darwish lived for many years in exile in Beirut and Paris. In the 1960s, Darwish was imprisoned for reciting poetry and traveling between villages without a permit. Considered a resistance poet, he was placed under house arrest when his poem Identity Card was turned into a protest song. He spent a lot of the rest of his life just kind of in exile, traveling around. In 1996, he was permitted very briefly to visit family and friends in Palestine. So this is a poem called, in translation from Arabic, I Come From There. I come from there and I have memories, born as mortals are. I have a mother and a house with many windows. I have brothers, friends, and a prison cell with a cold window. Mine is the wave snatched by seagulls. I have my own view and an extra blade of grass. Mine is the moon at the far edge of the words, and the bounty of birds and the immortal olive tree. I walked this land before the swords turned its living body into a laden table. I come from there. I render the sky onto her mother when the sky weeps for her mother, and I weep to make myself known to a returning cloud. I learnt all the words worthy of the court of blood so that I could break the rule. I learnt all the words and broke them up to make a single word, homeland. Yeah. A good example of a poet who walked the walk and talked the talk and was also very much a resistance fighter in his own way. I've got one more. Do you have any more?
I've actually got quite a few. So I've got this one and then two more.
Okay.
Yeah, so three.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
You go.
I go?
Yeah.
Okay. This is not so much a revolution or like poem of liberation, but just because this moment is being likened a lot to September 11th by both sides in saying, as a cautionary tale. But this poem is called...
Wait, and I want to clarify that. So by it's being... Well, I don't know if it's both sides in the conflict abroad, but it's being likened to 9/11, I think, to those of us in the U.S. who are kind of experiencing a resurgence of Islamophobia.
But also
by
Israel is
Israel.
trying to say it's their 9/11.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is titled September 11th, 2001, World Trade Center Aftermath. It's by D.H. Melhem. Okay, and this has kind of got three parts to it, so bear with me. Under a hard blue sky, a white shroud rises. Uptown, air turns acrid, I close my windows. Cloud messages from the plume of hell. I breathe you, taste the mist, concrete dust, chairs, shoes, files, photos, handbags, rings, a doll, upholstery, breakfast trays, body parts, and parting words and screams. Blood of the workers, passengers, police, firemen running up the stairs, past people streaming from a tower poised to crash. I breathe you flowing into the ceaseless sacrifice of innocence. My TV exhales frantic images. Have you seen her? Have you seen him? Everybody loved her. He was my friend. Anybody seen them? Anger rolls over grief and prayers. Vengeance echoes from the toxic caves. Like spores of a giant fungus, rage races through the air. Vengeance, the people cry. All die again. Part 2 is called Union Square Park, 2 weeks later, a pilgrimage. Sunday, a day as sunny as that other, slowly beneath the trees, along wire fences garlanding the grass with flowers, candles, prayers, love messages on colored papers, photographs. I walk with vigilant mourners winding past. Level with branches, George Washington astride a horse carries a fireman's flag and a peace flag tipped red with a Valentine heart. One people, invocations anoint his pedestal. Love one another, give peace a chance. Seated before him on the ground, Buddhists in unison strike their prayer drums. Nearby, a couple collect for the fireman's fund. Across the park, pipers and drummers march past Abraham Lincoln, proclaim the battle hymn of the Republic. Later, in a drugstore stocked with filter masks, I buy a box. Each one disclaims protection from toxic dust and poison gas. Drawn to my city's visible wound, I go downtown. The subway's nearly empty. I climb into streets without traffic, buildings powdered white. Tourists and residents aim their cameras. On Fulton Street, I join the pilgrimage downhill. Mask ready, I taste the faintest breath of acrid smoke, invisible incense of cries and clamor, still peopling the air. A woman pulls a suitcase, a man pulls his. Which one returns to a ghost apartment? Which one flees? I reach the crowd and Broadway barricades, girders twisted and wrenched into a pile, lie helpless beside the jagged crater. Distant survivor buildings at the rim face the great square of chaos, a 16-acre graveyard. Earth must have birthed canyons like this, quaking tectonic rage. A yellow crane poises hell in homage to the standing shell. That spire, that Colosseum, Tower of Pisa leaning grief against a phantom twin. Ground zero, ground of martyrs, crushed and burned, their screaming blood, bones, ashes pulverized into cement clouds and wind carries through the city to the world. The crowd, in hushed rumbling awe, slows down to get a better view. Keep moving, a bullhorn shouts. Into the roiling space, an old sign on a building calls, "A good time to invest." A policeman who had been there from the first explains to a visitor why people jumped from the windows, those whom a child had witnessed as birds afire. I wonder if they'd wildly hope for flight. We speak of gratitude. I feel the love, he says. The air falls heavier. I press a mask against my nose. My eyes smart a little. I pass the glass facade of an empty store. On pedestals, new shoes display their dust. A lone pub signals with a scrawl, "We're open." My skin begins to hurt. I need to find a subway, take home my heart load. The train shuns regular stops. At 96th Street, I find a trash can, throw the mask away. And then the last part, epilogue. Earth speaks. You blast omnivorous graves where millions in memory lie. You foul my pleasant air. You level my mountains of ore. With greed, your guiding law, and vengeance as your creed, your justice is suspect. Your mercy is select. All life deserves respect. Confront the suffering you mutually inflict. Share your crusts of bread. Loaves will multiply. Staunch my terrible wounds and heal your own thereby. Let barren hearts accept seeds from compassionate rain. Love is the sternest prayer. All life deserves respect. Yeah, I like that poem, and I feel like a lot of it still like is very reverberates and feels true today.
Yeah, I like especially, this person, obviously their city was victimized, but then the kind of ending epilogue of like the kind of violence that was done in the name of vengeance, and the kind of destruction that it brought. Yeah, a lot of beautiful imagery. I forgot, but that's right, that some people wore masks, especially like downtown and stuff after 9/11 because of the air quality. Actually, when COVID happened, my parents had masks because my mom stocked up after 9/11, which like was great because everyone was out of masks everywhere.
Really?
Yeah, we still had them in the attic.
Oh.
Yeah. Other thoughts on why that resonated with you?
I think sorry.
Oh, we should get you a COVID shot before we go to DC.
So because I think we do see a lot of the parallels, and I think he captures like the human heartbreak of that moment, and being able to say like this was a horrible thing, but he at the same time seems to decry the vengeance, and the vengeance that leads to the ultimate harming of everyone,
right, including the people who were initially harmed potentially. Like you're not any safer because of what was done in the name of vengeance. Yeah And it kind of captures beautifully this kind of brief moment after a tragedy where people are together. There was that moment where it felt like people were going to make it through by being together completely. And I remember that. And I remember it shifting too, even though we were so young. I was like 9 and you
Yeah.
were 10. Yeah. But yeah. This is the first historical event that we lived through that I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
9/11 rather, that I'm just like, oh, it's so funny that they're like, my students haven't lived through that and don't remember like what
Yeah.
the post 9/11 backlash was like, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to give a brief biography because
right.
D.H. Mellon was born in Brooklyn, graduated from New York University, and earned an MA and PhD from City University of New York. She is the author of 7 poetry collections. Her Notes on 94th Street, the first book of poems in English by an Arab American woman.
Nice.
Yeah.
This is a really sweet collection. I love that your teacher gave this to you.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
I actually haven't read it. Now I kind of want to.
You should.
Okay, this next poem is by Faiz Ahmed Faiz, who's a wonderful poet.
Yeah.
He's a Pakistani poet.
I was hoping you would select him.
Yes. So he was jailed. Gosh, I'm blanking on the time period. I want to say 70s.
I think.
Yeah. By General Zia-ul-Haq, who was a dictator in Pakistan who introduced a lot of really harsh laws in the name of religious conservatism. And like many dictators, kind of tried to use religious conservatism to kind of take more power.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a really interesting poet. He uses a lot of, so he writes in Urdu, so this is going to be in translation in English, but he uses a lot of religious imagery. But he was a communist and apparently didn't believe in God personally, but still was really moved by kind of imagery of sort of divine justice in the Quran, and kind of uses that in a lot of his poetry. So this poem that I'm about to read is called Hum de Kenge, which means, sorry for my terrible pronunciation, but means basically like, I think it means literally like we will see, but it means more like we will witness, or like one day we will, you know, bear witness to this. And this poem was later set to music by someone named Iqbal Bano, who is a ghazal singer, so a singer of Sufi poetry. And General Zia-ul-Haq had just outlawed wearing a sari because he said that it was too Hindu, which is fucking ridiculous and he just thought that it was also like promiscuous, you know, too much time to get into partition, but like the kind of style of dress was shared. There were many variations, but was shared across South Asia and like colonial lines, and then later the partition of India and Pakistan. Like the dress still looks very similar. Saris were worn in Pakistan, and I think we're actually coming back into fashion now. But anyway, he outlawed the wearing of saris, so Iqbal Bano put on a black sari and sang this poem to a massive crowd of 50,000 people. And it was got a lot of pushback, obviously, but very brave, very cool. And she sung it in Lahore, where my family's from.
Wow.
Okay, so Hum de Kenge, we shall see. Inevitably, we shall also see the day that was promised to us, decreed on the tablet of eternity, when dark peaks of torment and tyranny will be blown away like cotton fluff, when the earth's beating heart will pulsate beneath our broken feet, when crackling, crashing lightning will smite the heads of our tormentors, when from the seat of the Almighty every pedestal will lie displaced. Then the dispossessed, we who kept the faith, will be installed to our inalienable legacy. Every crown will be flung, every throne brought down. Only his name will remain, he who is both unseen and ubiquitous, he who is both the vision and the beholder. With the clarion call of I am truth, the truth that is me and the truth that is with you will ring out. All God's creatures will rule, those like me and those like you. Really beautiful imagery, and just a good reminder also, again, that like, even if you happen to get a good leader, great. Like, leaders are just humans, and a reminder that like we're all ultimately held accountable, if you are a person of faith, to a sense of, you know, being indebted to a creator and to like treat all of creation equally. And if you're not a person of faith, just to a sense of shared humanity. Also kind of cool note, when Faiz Ahmed Faiz was released from prison and went to exile, he actually hung out with Mahmoud Darwish. They were friends and they hung out in Beirut, and apparently just were really sad in exile in coffee shops together and talked about Palestine and Pakistan. And apparently Faiz Ahmed Faiz tried to translate some poems for Mahmoud Darwish, which is really sweet. other note, and I won't go into too much detail here, I've really tried teaching this poem in classes and it hasn't quite landed. I think that you would need more build up and context. It's a little too niche if you haven't talked enough about Pakistan's history or if you don't have enough time about Sufism. But this one line, I am the truth, he keeps in Arabic. It's not in Urdu as Ana al-Haq. And that's a direct quote from the Sufi poet al-Hallaj,
Right.
who ran through the streets of Baghdad in the 900s screaming, I am the truth.
In just religious and ecstasy.
Yeah, like he just
fervor,
was like completely blissed out because he felt he'd become so close to God.
Yeah.
And the Abbasids were like, oh, you're a heretic, and they murdered him. And it's debatable whether they did that because he was heretical or whether because he was starting to get pretty powerful and he was Persian and they were Arab rulers and they were worried that somehow he was going to be a problem. But he's kind of become a symbol for martyrdom in the face of injustice and tyranny. And so you'll hear a lot of this is not actually, it's interesting, again, this is not really Sufi poetry, but you will hear a lot of Sufi influenced poetry kind of quote that line, and Ahmed Faiz makes that reference here.
Yeah. And what I love about this is just that you don't need to look to the laws of man to be morally guided.
Yeah.
There is I feel like a sense of justice comes from the divine.
Absolutely.
And it comes from the desire to see the inherent humanity and divinity in people respected and flourish. And that should be what guides you.
Absolutely.
Right? And if you're someone who is sympathetic and you're being told by media and everyone around you, no, this is complicated, blah, blah, blah. If you support terror, you're a terrorist supporter, sympathizer. No, you are someone who is clearly guided by a sense of justice and wanting to see, horrendous wrongs righted.
And I think also we're both really big on this. I think again, not ceding religious language just to people who speak in the name of oppressive policies.
Yeah.
I think it's really powerful that he chose, and probably really pissed off, honestly, Zia al-Haq, that he chose. Oh, shit, I never even thought about that.
What?
The An al-Haq thing is even more interesting because the dictator's name was...
Al-Haq.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow.
Oh, maybe.
But yeah, I think it's smart to...
You think he kept it in there to say, I am...
I think it was definitely a Hallaj reference, but also might have had that double entendre.
Yeah.
That's
poets do.
Yeah, that's so funny. Whoa, I can't believe I didn't think about that before because I've read these lyrics a lot. But yeah, I think that's particularly powerful in this kind of context and time period where he was kind of dealing with a dictator who was using Islam to oppress people. And I mean, Zia al-Haq put laws on the books that made it really difficult to be Ahmadiyya in Pakistan and really really made a lot of people at risk. It's really powerful to reclaim that language and sort of say actually just this line, even every crown will be flung, really justice would mean that you would not be our representative.
Yeah I've got one that kind of dovetails pretty nicely with this. So this is from a collection of poetry of Haitian independence, translated by 3 different people.
So they were in French initially, or?
Yes, they were
Gotcha.
in French, and the French is in this book alongside the English
that's
translation,
cool.
but I don't speak French, so nor should anyone, except for these guys.
I really like French, but I like the sound of it. I don't like the French.
It's translated by Doris Y. Kaddish, Deborah Jensen, who I think is at Duke, and Norman Shapiro. This one is by a poet whose name is, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, Delia Lepre.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me. My high school French is gone.
Yeah. It's titled Haiti Watched as Her Children Rent Asunder. Then hymn in parentheses, from a Bible hymnal. Haiti watched as her children rent asunder, ever grown their lament most dolorous. Then God sent Alexander, freed from under her odious yoke. She sank to heaven thus: God, grace this hero's day munificent. Sweet now my joy, untrammeled, free. He smote the sin-forged chains that bound us pent. God save the author of my liberty. My days, however fair, were filled with woe. My suffering nights no poppy dreams were given. but Alexander laid vile bondage low. Whence night and day I raise my voice to heaven, God, grace this hero's day munificent. Sweet now my joy, untrammeled, free. He smote the sin-forged chains that bound us pent. God save the author of my liberty. My sons reborn with glory garlanded have seen the vicious tyrant flee our shore. Triumph to triumph, Alexander led them on, proud and unshackled evermore. God, grace this hero's day munificent. Sweet now my joy, untrammeled, free. He smote the sin-forged chains that bound us pent. God save the author of my liberty. With Themis, wisdom's mistress, as their guide, inspired by many a muse, they marched along, as Alexander smiles from far and wide. Retented. Oh, sorry, that was sorry. I was starting to read
The next one.
That's weird. That's the French side. Echo the accents of their lofty song. God, grace this hero's day munificent. Sweet now my joy, untrammeled, free. He smote the sin-forged chains that bound us pent. God save the author of my liberty. But what laments rise now? What dark despond, cruel death? Let virtue thwart your mission grim. God protect Alexander far beyond these palace walls. What would you do with him? God, grace this hero's day munificent. Sweet now my joy, untrammeled, free. He smote the sin-forged chains that bound us pent. God save the author of my liberty. No, death, you bear him off. O grievous lot, song turns to dirge. Gone, Alexander, he whose kindness, wisdom, talents all, could not spare him the fate wrought by fell destiny. From the immortal's bosom, where above rests your soul, O splendid progenitor, let your successor, with his love, protect your children and loathe tyrants more. Gone, Alexander, but his memory shall touch the mourning hearts of men withal. Gone, Alexander, but eternally his virtues shall cause endless tears to fall from the immortal's bosom, where above rests your soul. O splendid progenitor, let your successor with his love protect your children and loathe tyrants more. Remembering his stalwart manliness, I shall gain strength to parry fate's dire blows. And all my sons, to keep me despotless, shall risk pain, perils, and death's mortal woes. From the immortal's bosom, where above rests your soul, O splendid progenitor, let your successor, with his love, protect your children and loathe tyrants more.
I have a good anti-tyrant poem.
Yeah, and that a good leader of revolution should lead with love.
Yeah, I like that.
And that it's not the individual who, the revolution kind of dies with. But
Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought that was sweet.
A good reminder also to always organize in coalition.
Yeah.
Very sweet.
Should I do my second one and then you close us out, or?
How long is the second one?
This one is short.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, it's just a page. All right. This one is by Pierre Faubert, titled, Harried We Stand Upon This Shore. Harried we stand upon this shore, countryless, over earth's breadth and length. Courage is ours, but little more, be it our refuge and our strength. At last the hour tolls when our race need not live but for suffering, dying. In this world let us make our place, or nobly let us die for trying. Man's heart, throughout the earth outspanned, pounds proud whenever he will hear the cherished phrase, my fatherland, whose image calms woes bleak and bleat. We blush before its beauty's powers, though strong our hands, our dole defying. Ah, let a fatherland be ours, or nobly let us die for trying. Yes, let us die lest slavery's hand sully yet more these smiling shores, this pure sky and this happy strand. Shine not for tyrant conquerors. One day a booming voice on high shall sing our praises, glorify the liberator's deeds, and cry, nobly they vied, but and died for trying. That was written in 1842.
Oh, I love that. I love that kind of well, love sounds like a weird word, but that kind of bravery in what seems like the face of insurmountable just kind of strength and evil.
Yeah.
And that is really heartening to think about. Like, that it kind of reminds me of the Karbala story, but that's too off track. But like, yeah, just that there is a duty to resist no matter what the odds are, and there's a duty to kind of retain some sense of hope no matter what the odds are.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's kind of what I was thinking.
Really?
With the mix of this poem and the one that I read before,
Yeah.
with the Alexandria.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I wish I had a good poem about Karbala now, but I don't off the top of my head. Other thoughts about that one?
No, that's it.
Nice. Okay, this last one is actually a song called The Anthem by Leonard Cohen, but I'll just kind of read the lyrics. So I'd heard of Leonard Cohen maybe, and I knew that song that everyone knows. What's the one that everyone knows? Like, oh gosh, Hallelujah. They don't know that it was written by Leonard Cohen necessarily. They probably know a cover, but I knew that song.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anything else by him. And then after Trump's election, gosh, when was that? 2016? It was my first year of grad school. I think it was actually my first semester of grad school, right? Yeah. And, you know, obviously a moment where a lot of us were kind of thinking through things and thinking through our relationship to the U.S. and, you know, thinking about what it meant to be Muslim in the U.S. And my school at the time, Harvard Divinity School, held like a little end of the semester. Oh no, now I'm remembering. Every winter, so every like before we got out for winter break, they held a really beautiful festival of lights. It was like an interfaith festival or kind of ceremony, really. And so there would be different readings from different faith groups and like song, and it was almost held in complete darkness in the chapel, and we would all hold candles, and it was really beautiful. But this one felt especially kind of like a little bit of a coming together after what, you know, an event that stressed a lot of people out. A lot of people were kind of uncertain about the future. And that was the first time that I heard this song, and I was obsessed with it immediately, went home and listened to it. And then after that, just like kind of went through all of Leonard Cohen's songs and became a very big Leonard Cohen fan. But that was kind of when I first was introduced to him. So the song that they played then that I still really like is called The Anthem. And I'll just read the lyrics. The birds they sang at the break of day, start again, I heard them say, don't dwell on what has passed away, or what is yet to be. The wars they will be fought again, the holy dove she will be caught again, bought and sold and bought again, the dove is never free. Ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. And there are additional lyrics, but I think I'll just leave it there because I think that's the imagery that really stayed with me, that idea that even if you don't have a perfect offering, whatever bells are left, that you still ring them, and that this idea of like a crack that you let the light get in, even if it is just a crack, that's still sort of worth like continuing to go for, even if it seems exhausting that like, wow, it really seems like the same violence is happening again or the same wars are happening again, that you kind of hold on to that hope.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we can end it there.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.